The night I ended up at Ridgeline Books had nothing to do with books. My usual after-work routine was simple. Walk 3 blocks east from the office, grab a sandwich from the deli on Merchant Street, eat it at my desk while pretending I was still being productive. That was the plan on a Thursday in late October. Except the deli had a paper sign on the door. Private event. Back tomorrow. I stood there reading it twice, which is what you do when something small goes wrong, and you do not want to admit it bothers you. I turned around and walked the other way without much of a plan. 2 blocks north, there was a used bookstore I had passed probably 50 times without going in. Ridgeline Books. Green awning, the paint on the sign chipping just enough to look intentional. A small chalkboard on the sidewalk said, "Come in. We have chairs and no opinions about what you order." I went in. It was narrower inside than I expected, with shelves running floor to ceiling and a small cafe counter wedged into the back corner. 4 tables, mismatched chairs, 1 pendant light that hung low over the counter and made the whole space feel quieter than it probably was. A few people sat with paperbacks or laptops. Nobody was talking louder than they needed to. I ordered a black coffee from a guy with a beard and a flannel shirt, who seemed personally invested in every cup he made. Then I found the only open chair, near a shelf labeled Pacific Northwest Fiction, and sat down. That was when I noticed her. She was at the table beside mine, a hardback open in front of her, a mug of something steaming near her right hand, dark hair pulled back, but not carefully. Like she had done it fast and forgot about it. She was reading with the kind of focus people usually reserve for things that actually matter to them, not the performative cafe reading, where the book is half a prop. I was looking at the cover of the book she was reading when she turned a page and glanced up, the way people do when they sense movement nearby. She did not look away. I do not mean she stared. I mean she looked at me like she was deciding something, calmly and without embarrassment, and then went back to her book. Most people pretend that small moment of eye contact did not happen. She just let it be a thing that had happened and moved on. I drank my coffee and opened my phone and tried to act like I was checking emails. I was not checking emails. I heard her laugh once, quietly, at something on the page. Just a small exhale, barely sound at all. But it was the kind of laugh that is real, the kind that escapes before a person can decide whether to share it. When she got up to leave 20 minutes later, she tucked the book under her arm and pulled on her coat. At the door, she paused. Not dramatically, not like a movie. She just stood there for a second, like she was remembering something, then pushed outside. I sat there with my empty coffee cup and the low feeling that I had just let something interesting walk out into the cold. I did not know her name. I did not know her voice beyond that one quiet laugh. I only knew she read the kind of books people actually finish. The next evening, I told myself I needed coffee anyway. She was not there. I went back on Saturday. Still not there. The bearded guy behind the counter was starting to recognize me, which should have been embarrassing and was a little. The following Thursday, I almost went back to the deli, which had reopened by then. I stood on the corner for a moment, actually standing on the corner debating with myself like a man who has misplaced his priorities, and then walked north. She was there. Same table, different book. Mug beside her. Hair back in the same fast way. She looked up when I walked in, the same way as before. But this time there was something slightly different in it. Not surprise. More like she had been expecting me to either show up or not, and here I was, and now she knew which one it was. I ordered my coffee and stood there waiting for it and tried to figure out if walking over would make me look like a person or a problem. The bearded guy slid my cup across the counter and said nothing helpful. I walked over. She watched me stop beside her table. "I'm going to say something that sounds worse than I mean it," I said. She looked up without closing the book. "That's a promising start. I've been here 3 times hoping you'd be here." She was quiet for a moment. "And now I am." "Now you are." She looked at the chair across from her. "Then sit down before you make this stranger than it already is." I sat. She marked her page with a receipt from somewhere and closed the book. Her name was Waverly Holt. She told me without me asking, which I liked, because it meant she had already decided to have the conversation. I told her mine. "You look like you work in an office," she said. Is that bad? It's just specific. I did work in an office. Brand strategy at a mid-size agency on 4th Avenue, the kind of job where I spent my days helping companies figure out how to talk about themselves, which was either meaningful or ironic depending on the week. I told her the short version. She asked one question about it, one precise question that cut straight to the part I found most interesting about my own work, which almost no one managed to do. I asked what she did. I edit manuscripts. Fiction? Mostly. Literary fiction. Some narrative nonfiction. Do you like it? She considered that. I like the part where I figure out what a writer was trying to say and help them actually say it. And the other parts? The other parts involve a lot of email. That made me laugh. She did not quite smile, but her expression changed just enough. We talked for almost an hour. About the neighborhood which she had lived in for 3 years and I had worked in for 2. Somehow without crossing paths until now. About the store, which she came to every Thursday because her apartment was 6 blocks away, and she liked having a reason to leave it at the end of the week. About the book she was reading, which was about a cartographer who gets hired to map a small island and slowly realizes the island keeps changing shape. Does he figure out why? I asked. I'm on page 214 and he still hasn't, she said, which is either a flaw or the entire point. I said I thought it was probably the point. She looked at me like she was not sure yet, but was open to being convinced. When she got up to leave, she put on her coat and picked up the book and said, "Same time next week, if you want." It was not a question. It was an offering. "Yeah," I said, "I want." She nodded and walked out, and this time I did not feel like I had missed anything. The Thursdays became a thing we both just knew about. I would get there around 6:30. She was almost always already there. Book open, mug beside her. The first few weeks, we talked until the store was close to closing, which was 9, and then stood outside on the sidewalk for another 20 minutes in the cold, because neither of us had said everything yet. I learned things in pieces, the way you do when someone does not give you their full story at once, because they do not think of themselves as a story. Waverly had grown up in Boise and moved to Seattle for graduate school, an MFA in creative writing that she had completed, and then decided not to use the way everyone expected. She had wanted to write. Still did in some quiet way. She did not talk about often, but she had discovered she was better at reading other people's work than finishing her own. She said it without bitterness, which I respected. She had a younger sister in Portland she talked to every Sunday. She disliked loud restaurants and people who spoke in sports metaphors in professional settings. She kept a list in a notebook of every book she had read since she was 19. She had never owned a car, which in Seattle was manageable if slightly inconvenient. I told her things too, more than I planned, which was becoming a pattern. About the job, which I was good at but which had started to feel like something I was performing rather than doing. About my apartment, which I had moved into 2 years ago after a long relationship ended, and which I had been meaning to make feel more like mine ever since. About the fact that I was 31, and had recently started noticing a gap between the life I was living, and something I could not name clearly but knew was not quite this. Waverly listened the way editors probably listen. Not waiting for a pause, not preparing her response. Actually inside what I was saying. "You're not unhappy," she said one evening, after I had trailed off. "No. But you're not satisfied. That's accurate. Those are different problems." I looked at her. "Which one is harder?" She thought about it. "Unhappy has an obvious fix. Not satisfied means you have to figure out what you actually want, which most people spend a long time avoiding." I did not have a good answer for that. She did not seem to expect one. By December, the Thursday evenings had started to feel like the part of the week I was working toward. I caught myself on a Tuesday, thinking about something I wanted to tell her, and realizing I had 4 days to wait. That detail annoyed me more than it should have. One Thursday in mid-December, she came in later than usual. Coat damp from sleet, something slightly tight around her eyes. "Bad day?" I asked. She sat down and put her bag on the floor. "I turned down a manuscript today." "You've turned down manuscripts before." "This one was from a writer I've been working with for 2 years. She sent me something new and it wasn't ready and I had to tell her and She stopped. pressed her mouth together for a second. She was upset. Was she wrong to be? No. But I wasn't wrong either, both can be true. Waverly looked at her mug. I know. I just hate being the person who says the thing that hurts, even when the thing is right. You could have told her it was great, I said. Then, she would have sent it out and gotten 30 rejections, and wondered why nobody saw what I was supposed to see. She shook her head. That would have been worse. I know it would have been worse. So, you made the harder call because it was better for her. Yes. That sounds like someone who cares a lot about the work. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I could not fully read. Sometimes caring about the work means disappointing the person. I did not know then why that sentence stayed with me. The week before Christmas, the store had a small reading event. A local author, chairs arranged near the front window. Maybe 20 people. Waverly texted me about it. The first time she had texted me about anything, other than letting me know she was running late. We sat together near the back. She had her coat in her lap and her arms folded. Not closed off, just contained. The way she usually held herself in rooms, with more people than she preferred. The author read for 40 minutes from a novel about a son who goes back to his hometown to settle his father's estate and finds letters his father had written but never sent. At one point I looked over at Waverly. Her eyes were fixed on the author, but they were not entirely dry. She caught me looking and said nothing. She also did not look away. After the reading, we stood on the sidewalk while people filed out around us. It was cold, the kind of Seattle cold that is not brutal, but is insistent, damp and gray. The letters thing got me, she said. I could tell. My dad used to leave notes. She said it simply, like it was just information. Around the house. If he made coffee before I was up, he'd leave a note by the machine. Little things. He died 4 years ago. I did not say I was sorry because she was not inviting sympathy, she was sharing something. Do you still have them? I asked. Some. The ones I found before I knew they mattered. We stood there for a moment. Traffic passed. Somewhere down the block someone was playing music from a car. I'm glad you texted me about this, I said. Waverly glanced at me sideways. I figured you'd want to know. I did. Good. She started walking. Come on, I know a place that makes decent hot chocolate and doesn't play Christmas music. I followed her. On New Year's Eve, neither of us had plans. That came out in a Thursday conversation without either of us trying to make it into anything. She said she did not really see the point of New Year's parties. I said I had been to enough of them to agree. By the end of the conversation it had been decided, without being formally decided, that we would spend it together. We walked around Capitol Hill for 2 hours, the kind of neighborhood walk with no destination, stopping when something looked interesting. She bought a scarf from a woman selling things on the corner. I bought 2 hot dogs from a cart and ate both of them, because I had missed dinner. At midnight, we were standing on a small hill overlooking the water, the fireworks downtown reflected on the surface below. She was close enough that I could feel the warmth of her arm through her coat. I looked at her. She was already looking at me. I kissed her, which I had been thinking about for approximately 6 weeks, and had somehow not planned. She kissed me back, which was better than anything I had rehearsed in my head. When we pulled back, she looked at me with that expression she had, the one that was not quite a smile but was something I had come to understand was better. I thought you were going to do that 2 weeks ago, she said. I was, I said. I talked myself out of it. Why? Because I didn't want to get it wrong. She was quiet for a second. You didn't. We walked back toward her neighborhood. I went upstairs. I did not leave until morning. The morning should have been easy. That was what I thought as I sat at her kitchen table while she made coffee in a French press with the focused attention she brought to everything. We talked. We laughed about the woman at the reading, who had asked the author if the son in the novel ever forgave his father, as if the question had one answer. Waverly poured my coffee without asking how I took it, and she got it right. I noticed that and let it mean what it meant. When I got up to leave, she walked me to the door and said, Thursday, I said. She nodded and closed the door, and I walked home in the early gray morning feeling like a person who had figured out where the thing was that he had been looking for. She did not come the following Thursday. I got there at 6:30. Her table was empty. I sat down and ordered my coffee and checked my phone and told myself she was late. By 8 o'clock I had finished 2 coffees, answered every email I had, and read the first 40 pages of a book I pulled from the nearest shelf without caring what it was. I texted her once, "Hey, did I get the night wrong?" She did not respond. By Tuesday of the following week, I had replayed New Year's Eve probably 20 times from every angle. The walk, the fireworks, the kiss which she had kissed back, the morning in her kitchen which had felt entirely natural. Same time Thursday. The door closing. Nothing that said mistake. Nothing that said slow down. I kept going back to the coffee. She had poured it right. That felt like a small significant thing, and I hated myself a little for holding on to it. I did not go to Ridgeline that Thursday. I went home instead, and cooked dinner for the first time in 2 weeks. Pasta and jarred sauce, which I ate standing at the kitchen counter, because setting the table for one felt too deliberate. My phone buzzed at 9:47 p.m. There was an address. Hendrickson Lane, a wine bar on Madison. Then, tomorrow, 7? I sat down, looked at the message for a while. Then I wrote, "I'll be there." Hendrickson Lane was low-lit and not too loud, small tables, exposed brick, the kind of place that had been there long enough to not be trying. Waverly was already at a table when I arrived, a glass of white wine in front of her, her coat still on like she had just sat down or was not entirely sure she was staying. "Hi," she said. "Hi." I sat. There was a moment where neither of us used it for anything. "I handled the last 2 weeks badly," she said. I had expected an explanation first. "Not that. You disappeared," I said. "I know. After telling me Thursday, I know." Her hands were around the stem of her wine glass, but she was not drinking. "I'm not going to tell you I had a good reason, because I didn't. I had a feeling I didn't know what to do with, and I did the thing I do when I don't know what to do with something. Which is, treat it like a manuscript that needs more time." I stared at her. "I'm not a manuscript. I know that." For the first time since I had sat down, she looked slightly less composed. "That's the problem." "What does that mean?" She set the glass down. "Editing is something I understand. I know where to put pressure. I know how to read what's underneath the surface. I know what questions to ask and when." She paused. "With you, I don't know any of those things. I don't know how this goes, and I realized on New Year's morning that I had let it get further than the place where I know what I'm doing, and it scared me. I had come in with some version of righteous feeling stored up, the reasonable kind, 2 weeks of not hearing from someone after a night that had seemed to matter. But sitting across from her, watching her say something that was clearly difficult to say, I felt it go somewhere quieter. "I need you to know it actually hurt," I said. "Not just confused me. It hurt. I know. I'm sorry." She said it directly, not as a formality. "I was afraid and I handled it like a coward. Waverly, that's what it was, okay." I looked down at the table, then back at her. "Thank you for saying it like that." She reached across and put her hand over mine briefly, then pulled it back. "I'm not good at being uncertain," she said. "Most of the things in my life I've made very deliberate. The city, the career, the apartment, the books, the Thursdays." She stopped. "You were not deliberate. That's a compliment?" "It's the truth. Those aren't always the same thing." "No," she said. "But in this case they are." I ordered wine. We ordered food neither of us finished. And we talked for 2 hours. The kind of talking that moves between easy and hard without announcing which it's about to be. I told her about the gap I had mentioned weeks ago. The one between the life I was performing and something more real. She asked better questions about it than I could answer. Somewhere in there I said that the Thursday evenings had started feeling like the most honest part of my week. And she looked at the table and said nothing for a moment, which meant she understood. Outside, the street was cold and dry. We stood near the entrance while cabs moved past. "Before we're done tonight," Waverly said, "I need to tell you one more thing." There was something in her voice that made me go still. "Okay." She looked at me evenly. "The first Thursday wasn't an accident." I heard her but did not immediately understand. "What do you mean?" "I knew about Ridgeline because of you. Your agency has a blog. You wrote a post about independent businesses in the neighborhood, and you mentioned the store specifically. It was from 2 years ago, but I had read it. I knew you worked nearby. I was quiet. I freelance for a publisher that sometimes works with your agency's clients, she said. Someone mentioned your name. I looked you up. I read your work. She paused. I thought you seemed interesting, and I knew where you might go. I tried to trace it back. Her at the table when I walked in, the book she was reading, the way she had looked up without surprise. You chose that table, I said. Yes. You were waiting to see if I'd come in. I had been there twice before. On Thursdays, on the chance that you might. The street noise felt far away. So the first look, that wasn't chance. No. And when I came back the next week, I hoped you would. I stood there with that information settling into the shape of every Thursday I thought I had stumbled into by good luck. The woman with the book. The quiet laugh. The not looking away. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I almost didn't. Her voice was steady, but there was effort in it. And then I thought about the fact that what scared me most about New Year's was how real it felt. And if it's real, then you should know how it started. I looked down the block. A dog walker passed with 3 dogs who had very different ideas about direction. A light changed and a line of cars moved forward. When I first walked into that store, I said slowly, I was not looking for anything. I know. I thought I ended up there because of a deli. You did, she said quietly. The rest is what I did with that. There's a difference between creating a situation and faking a feeling. Yes. I turned back to her. Everything after the first night. Was any of that planned? No. She said it without hesitation. I planned to meet you. I didn't plan anything else. I didn't plan to keep coming back. I didn't plan to close my book when you sat down. She paused. I didn't plan New Year's. I believed her. That was the thing I kept landing on. Standing there with my version of the story partially rewritten underneath me, I believed her. It did not make it simple. I need a few days, I said. She nodded. No argument, no attempt to pull me back. You should have them. I walked home. It took 45 minutes, which was longer than it needed to be. But I was not ready to stop moving. For 3 days I went through the regular mechanics of a week. Work, lunch, a call with my parents on Sunday, during which I said fine several times without meaning it. I ran 4 miles on Sunday morning, which I almost never do, because I needed somewhere to put the feeling. The feeling, when I actually sat with it, was complicated. She had positioned herself, chosen the table, made herself available in a place she had reason to believe I might go. That was true. She had let me think the first meeting was chance when it was not. That was also true. But then I kept circling back to everything that followed. The Thursdays that had built themselves without either of us designing them. The evenings that ran long because we did not want to stop. The way she had told me about her father's notes on the sidewalk outside the reading. Not because I asked, but because she trusted me with it. The New Year's morning when she poured my coffee black without asking. None of that was a setup. That was just 2 people who had figured out they wanted to know each other. She had told me when she could have kept it buried. That part would not leave me alone. She could have said nothing, and I would have gone on believing the story was cleaner than it was. Instead, she told me at the exact moment it might cost her everything. Because she had decided that what was between us deserved to start from something real. On Monday evening, I called her. She picked up after 2 rings. Meet me at Ridgeline, I said. Thursday, same time. A beat of quiet. Okay, and Waverly, yeah? Bring the book. I want to know if the cartographer ever figures out the island. The pause this time was different. Softer. He does, she said. Eventually. When I got to Ridgeline on Thursday, she was already at the table by the shelves. No book open. Mug beside her, both hands wrapped around it. She was watching the door when I came in. I ordered my coffee and sat down across from her. She did not speak. Neither did I for a moment. I want to say something, and I need you to actually hear it, I said. Okay, what you did at the beginning wasn't nothing. You put me in a situation I didn't know I was in. That took something away from me that I can't get back. Her hands tightened slightly around the mug, but she did not look away. I know. I'm not saying I'm fine with it. I'm not asking you to be good. I looked at her. But I've been sitting with this for 3 days trying to find the place where what came after becomes less real because of how it started. And I can't find it. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, just enough. Everything after that first night, I said, I believe. Waverly set her mug down slowly. I meant all of it. I know you did. The bearded guy behind the counter dropped something and swore quietly. Someone near the door laughed at a book. Outside, rain had started, the soft Seattle kind that blurs the edges of things. If this keeps going, I said, I need it to be yours and mine equally. No plans I don't know about, no decisions made for me. Yes, she said, completely, and at some point you have to tell me what you were actually trying to write. In the MFA, what the book was. She looked caught off guard, which was rare enough that I noticed it. Why? Because you told me you were better at reading other people's work than finishing your own. And I don't think that's entirely true. She was quiet for a moment, looking at me with something I could not name but wanted to understand better. Maybe, she said finally. I'll tell you later. I leaned back. The rain tapped against the window. My coffee was cooling and I did not care. Last time someone said that to me, I said. It turned into the longest story I've ever heard. Waverly almost smiled. Not the controlled version. The real one, the kind that changed her face completely and disappeared before she could decide whether to keep it. She reached into her bag and set a small folded piece of paper on the table. I wrote this before you got here, she said. In case you needed to see something concrete. I unfolded it. Her handwriting was precise and a little slanted, the way writers' handwriting often is. One line. This is where I stop knowing what comes next. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my coat pocket. Okay, I said, okay. We start from here. Outside, the rain kept going. The store stayed warm. We sat at the same table where everything had started, the one she had chosen before she knew me, and this time we were both choosing it.